Your body already knows the answer to this question. Not your opinions, not what you were raised to believe, not what feels comfortable or what you wish were true. Your body. The specific proportions of your skeleton, the size of organs you have never thought about in evolutionary terms. Your capacity for jealousy so intense it feels like a physical injury. Your body has been keeping a record of what your ancestors actually did for 300,000 years. And the record is more complicated and more honest than anything anyone has ever told you about love. So let us read it together. Because here is what nobody tells you when this conversation comes up. The question of whether humans are naturally monogamous is not really a question about biology. It is a question about you, right now, in whatever relationship you are in or wish you were in or are recovering from. And the answer, once you actually look at all the evidence, does not vindicate any simple story. It does not prove that monogamy is natural and infidelity is biological failure. It does not prove that humans are naturally promiscuous and that commitment is a cultural cage. What it proves is something far stranger and far more true than either of those comfortable positions. Your ancestors were not perfectly faithful, and they loved each other deeply. Both things were true simultaneously, and understanding how that was possible will change how you think about every relationship you have ever had. Let us start with your skeleton. Evolutionary biologists have a tool that sounds almost absurd until you understand how it works. They can read the mating system of a species from the physical structure of the bodies it produces. Different mating systems create different evolutionary pressures. Different evolutionary pressures leave different anatomical signatures. The body is a record of reproductive behavior written in bone and muscle across hundreds of thousands of years. Here is the key principle. In species where one male mates with many females and males compete intensely for that access, gorillas are the clearest example, males evolve to be significantly larger than females. Size wins fights. Bigger males reproduce more. Selection pressure for male size is extreme. Male gorillas are roughly twice the body mass of female gorillas. The skeleton is the mating system made physical. In strictly monogamous species, gibbons are the example here, males and females are approximately the same size. There is no size advantage to be gained from male competition when each male pairs with one female regardless. The selection pressure disappears. The bodies converge. Now look at humans. Human males are 15 to 20% heavier than human females, 5 to 7% taller. That gap exists. It is not as large as gorillas, it is larger than gibbons. Your skeleton is pointing towards something in between. Not strict monogamy, not intense polygyny. Something more complicated, something messier, something that does not map cleanly onto either pole. Your body was shaped by an ancestral mating environment that involved some male competition for mates. Not as much as gorillas, more than gibbons. The fossil record is in your proportions, but that is not the most revealing anatomical evidence. Not even close. Stay with me here, because this next part is genuinely extraordinary and most people have never heard it. In species where females mate with multiple males in rapid succession, something remarkable happens at the level of reproduction itself. Sperm from different males competes inside the female reproductive tract for fertilization. This creates selection pressure for males to produce more sperm. More sperm means more competitive advantage. More competitive advantage means more offspring. More offspring means the trait spreads. The result over thousands of generations is larger testes relative to body size. Chimpanzees are highly promiscuous. Multiple males mate with the same female in rapid succession. Chimpanzee testes are enormous relative to body size. The sperm competition is real and the anatomy reflects it absolutely. Gorillas have a different system. Dominant males mate exclusively with females in their group. No sperm competition occurs. Gorilla testes are tiny relative to body size. No competition, no selection pressure, no size. Human testis size sits directly between these two extremes. Larger than gorillas, which tells us some sperm competition occurred in our evolutionary past. Smaller than chimpanzees, which tells us we were not as promiscuous as they are. Your body is telling you that your ancestors were neither gorillas nor chimpanzees. They were something in between. Something that does not have a clean, simple name. Now, here is where it gets personal. Because you might be sitting with some discomfort right now. And that discomfort is important because the biology is not saying anything about what you should do or what is morally acceptable or what relationships should look like. It is describing what happened in the past. What selection pressures shaped the bodies and brains that you are currently living in. And understanding those pressures honestly is the only way to understand why love and fidelity and jealousy feel the way they feel. So let us look at the anthropological evidence, because what the biology implies, the anthropology either confirms or complicates. Of all the human societies that have been documented by anthropologists, hundreds of cultures across every continent across the 20th century, roughly 80 to 85% formally permit polygyny. One man, multiple wives. This statistic is frequently cited as proof that humans are naturally polygamous and that strict monogamy is a cultural imposition against our biological nature. But that statistic is doing something deeply misleading. Permitting polygyny is not the same as practicing it universally or even commonly. In the vast majority of societies that formally allow multiple wives, most actual relationships are between two people. Polygyny, when it occurs, is concentrated among high-status men with the resources to attract and support multiple partners. Most men in most human societies across history have had one primary partner at a time, not because they were forced to, because most men lack the resources that would make additional partnerships viable. The legal permission and the lived reality are consistently different things, and conflating them produces a completely distorted picture of what human mating actually looked like. But here is the other side of that same coin, and this is the part that most people find even harder to hear. That primary partnership, the pair bond between two people that every single human culture has recognized in some form, was rarely perfectly exclusive in the way that modern romantic ideals define exclusivity. The genetic record is unambiguous about this. Studies of ancient DNA from early human populations consistently show fewer distinct male lineages than female lineages, contributing to the next generation. What does that mean in plain language? It means some men had children with many women. Many men had children with no one. The distribution of male reproductive success was significantly more unequal than female reproductive success. One famous genetic study estimated that a single man living approximately 4,000 to 5,000 years ago in the Eurasian steppe has somewhere between 16 and 19 million male line descendants alive today. One man, 16 to 19 million descendants. The genes remember what no document recorded. And yet, and this is the part that should stop you, the pair bond is real. Every single human culture ever documented has some form of recognized partnership between two specific individuals, some culturally acknowledged relationship that is distinct from casual contact, that carries mutual obligations, that involves shared living arrangements and shared investment in offspring. You do not embed a behavior in social structure unless it matters enough to require formal management and is also fragile enough to require protection. The universality of marriage as a human institution tells you that the underlying pair bond is both real and requires active maintenance. The pair bond matters. It has always mattered across every culture, across every era. And it was also frequently not perfectly exclusive. Both things were true simultaneously for most of human history in most human lives. So what does that mean for you right now? Because we need to talk about jealousy. Jealousy is a cross-cultural universal. Every human society ever studied experiences it. Every human being reading this has felt it. The specific structure of jealousy, its intensity, its ability to override everything else, its capacity to feel like physical pain, reveals something extraordinary about what the ancestral mating environment actually selected for. You do not evolve a psychological response to a threat that never existed. Evolution is ruthlessly efficient. The machinery gets built when the pressure is consistent enough and the cost of the threat is high enough to make the machinery worth the metabolic investment. Jealousy exists because pair bonds were real and valuable and consistently threatened. The pain of romantic betrayal is not a cultural invention. It is not oversensitivity. It is not a sign that you care too much. It is 300,000 years of evolution telling you with complete clarity that what you had mattered, that losing it carries real costs, that the bond you formed with another specific person was worth protecting with the full intensity of your emotional architecture. But here is where the evidence takes one final turn that most people never reach. Research on jealousy across multiple cultures finds consistent differences in what triggers the most intense jealousy in men versus women. Men report more intense jealousy in response to sexual infidelity, the threat that a partner has had sex with someone else. Women report more intense jealousy in response to emotional infidelity, the threat that a partner has formed a deep emotional bond with someone else. These differences are predicted exactly by evolutionary theory. For a man in the ancestral environment, sexual infidelity creates the risk of investing resources in offspring that are not genetically his. For a woman in the ancestral environment, emotional infidelity creates the risk that a partner redirects his resources and investment to another woman. Both threats are real. Both produce jealousy. The relative intensity tracks the relative reproductive cost of each type of infidelity. The structure of human jealousy is a map of the ancestral mating environment written in the architecture of emotion. It tells you what the stakes were. It tells you what was being protected. It tells you what mattered. And what it tells you is this. Your ancestors formed pair bonds with specific individuals. Those bonds were emotionally real, neurochemically profound, and functionally critical for raising children in the dangerous conditions of the ancient world. The oxytocin and vasopressin systems that produce human attachment and preference for one specific person over all others evolved because pair bonding worked. Pairs that stayed together raised more surviving children. The emotional architecture of human love is the product of hundreds of thousands of years of that selective reality. And within that reality, around the edges of those pair bonds, occasionally, in patterns that left traces in the genetic record and the anthropological documentation of virtually every human society ever studied, behavior outside the bond also occurred at significant rates in both sexes. Your ancestors were not perfectly faithful, and they loved each other. Both things were true at the same time. And if you have ever found yourself in a relationship where both things felt simultaneously true, where the love was real and the bond mattered, and something still happened that broke it, you were not experiencing a modern failure of character or a personal defect. You were experiencing something ancient, something written into the bodies and brains of your species before your species had a name. That does not make it hurt less. Nothing about understanding the evolutionary origins of jealousy reduces the specific physical weight of betrayal when it is yours to carry. But it does mean something important. The pain is not a sign that you loved wrongly or too much or in a way that made you weak. The pain is evidence that the bond was real, that it mattered, that losing it cost something genuine. Your ancestors were not perfectly faithful. They were not perfectly monogamous. The biology is clear. The anthropology is clear. The genetic record is clear. And they loved each other. The jealousy is clear about that too. Both things, always at the same time, for 300,000 years.